Some of you daisy cakes may be wondering what I've thought of the books I've chosen for Shelve It or Shove It. That's a game where I pick books based solely on their covers. And if you've been watching me for a while, then you know that I go back every 6 months to review the books I've chosen for that period. Why? Because I am the host for Shelve It or Shove It, Daisy Ex Machina, the drag queen detective who investigates all things speculative in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. So we're going to look at the books I've chosen from January 2024 to June 2024. I will either zap a book, which means I do not recommend it, or I'll bless a book, which means I do recommend it. So let's get started. In January, I picked The Oxygen Farmer by Colin Holmes because the cover was striking. This scene on the moon looking at the Earth, and the font I thought really made the title pop. This is, of course, a science fiction novel, and it's from a publisher I've never heard of, Cat Books. What I liked about it was the main character was a little atypical for a hero because he was an old man on the edge of retirement named Millennium Harrison, which you think of Star Wars, of course. Anyway, Harrison is an oxygen farmer, one of the last independent oxygen farmers on the moon. He's cranky and doesn't have a very good relationship with his daughter who runs the space agency. He accidentally goes into a restricted section of the moon and uncovers a mystery that could change everything, especially when someone dies. I thought the book was okay. It was fine. It felt like I was reading a really old sci-fi book from the 50s or 60s. In fact, the plot is super similar to Robert Heinlein's rocket ship Galileo, except substitute the Nazis with Soviets. So there's that. I don't know. I thought the story was really predictable. There was no really new or amazing concepts. It felt like everything has been done before. So I'm going to have to zap The Oxygen Farmer. It's not a bad book per se. It's just meh, and it's been done before. In February, I was so excited to have chosen Womb City by Tlotlo Tsamaase because I thought the cover was so striking. Just look at it. Babies growing in the head of an android. That's not what the book is about. It was presented as some dystopian future in Botswana where Neela, the main character, is controlled by her husband via a microchip in her brain, and she's having a kid that's growing in an artificial womb. And there was supposed to be a ghost story. I really tried to give this book a chance, but the world building didn't make any sense to me. Apparently, you can body hop in this world so no one ever dies, and they keep the souls of criminals because why? The whole thing didn't make any sense, and this whole system of keeping souls and putting them back in new bodies wasn't sustainable. It was kind of ridiculous. And add to this, it was kind of a Handmaid's Tale type of story. I couldn't do it. I DNF'd it around 40%. And at that point, I didn't even get to the ghost story. If you're going to say a book has a ghost story, don't make us wait until the halfway point to introduce a ghost. I was very frustrated with Womb City. And yes, that means I zap it. Okay, so I didn't have a great start with Shelve It or Shove It, but the next book more than made up for it. I'm talking about The Fox Wife by Yangsze Choo. First of all, look at the cover. It's all white except for this woman dressed in red walking in the snow, and there's a reflection of a fox. Anyway, this is a historical fiction fantasy set in Manchuria in the early 1900s. There are two POV characters. The eponymous foxwife, a supernatural woman named Snow, who is mourning her murdered son and seeks vengeance. And then there's Bao. Again, not your typical main character. He's an older man who is in his twilight years, who is a famous detective, and decides to take up one more case when a woman is found who is frozen to death. The writing is, I think, literary. The characters are all so intriguing and complicated and fascinating. And add to that, a murder mystery that hides a bunch of other mysteries. This is a winner. Of course, The Foxwife gets my blessing. After filming this video, I realized that I skipped April. In April, I chose the young adult novel Where Sleeping Girls Lie by Faridah, Àbíké-Íyímídé. And I apologize if that name is totally mispronounced. Anyway, I thought it was going to be a YA horror based on the cover and the byline, Secrets Haunt These Hallowed Halls. But I was disappointed to find out it was a thriller with no supernatural element. It's about a girl named Shelve who is homeschooled and isolated by her super strict father, but when her father dies, she gets enrolled in a private academy called Alfred Nobel Academy for her junior year of high school. But then her roommate disappears. She gets involved with some mean girls called the Unholy Trinity. There's some sketchy boys. Shelve is hiding a past and lots of secrets. There was a point where I thought Shelve was going to go anti-hero and get really dark, but that didn't happen. I found the story underwhelming and forgettable. Heck, I forgot to film this segment, so I think I will have to zap Where Sleeping Girls Lie. That said, it's not badly written, and I think there definitely is an audience for this book, so maybe it could be for you. I just know it wasn't for me. In May, I chose 2 books. One of the books, The Book That Broke the World by Mark Lawrence, is the second book in a trilogy that started with The Book That Wouldn't Burn, which I picked for Shelve It or Shove It last year. And yes, it's been announced it's a trilogy called the Library Trilogy. I won't say anything about the plot because that would spoil the first book, but overall, I don't think it was as good as the first book, The Book That Wouldn't Burn, but it's the second book in a trilogy. Second books bridge the first book with the third book, and they're never usually as good as the other 2 books, but it does set us up for the conclusion. The setting is, of course, the library with a capital L, a multidimensional structure that holds all books written from all races throughout time, or something like that. Unfortunately for me, there was the introduction of a new character in the second book who was a new race, or at least a race I didn't remember from the first book, and I was not interested in. I wanted to find out where we picked up before. So I didn't really find myself immediately drawn in. And I'm still not crazy about that new character. Anyway, The Book That Broke the World was well written, and I still maintain this is one of the best fantasies I've read in the 21st century. That is, unless the author really screws up the third book, but I doubt that's going to happen. The overall library trilogy, of course, gets my blessing. By the way, the third book is scheduled to be released in May 2025, so less than a year from now. What are you waiting for? The other book I chose in May was Ocean's Godori by Elaine Choo, another science fiction novel with a gorgeous cover. I really am a sucker for these retro-type Art Deco stylistic illustrations. The main character, Ocean Yoon, is a pilot of a spaceship. And this pilot, Ocean, has a past. Okay, how am I going to say this? The book committed the biggest sin a book can commit. It bored me. The character was unlikable, which sometimes I don't mind, but it crossed over into annoying. And the plot seemed to have a lot of action that didn't go anywhere. I really pushed myself to 60% into the book. But I got to the point where I wasn't looking forward to reading, and that's not great. Life is too short. I DNF'd it, and I felt foolish because I should have DNF'd it a lot earlier, so it goes without saying that I have to zap Ocean's Godori. I was so discombobulated by Ocean's Godori, I had to read a Flavia de Luce novel to revive my love of reading. So to wrap this up, in June, I decided to drop young adult from Shelve or Shove It and replace it with horror. And this was the right decision because I immediately picked up a horror novel, Ghost Station by S.A. Barnes, with a super creepy cover of a blood-splattered space station. As much as I liked the cover, the title is super generic, but the story itself gave me the vibes of the Alien movie. The main character, Ophelia Bray, who is the black sheep of this rich and powerful Bray family, who apparently owns half the known planets or something like that. Ophelia is a psychologist sent on missions to prevent astronauts from going mad because apparently there's some sort of space sickness that can turn people into psychopaths. She's on a mission to a planet that was abandoned by the Bray Corporation, i.e. her greedy, evil corporate relatives. There's also an alien city on the planet that is in ruins because the native alien race has been dead for, thousands of years. Anyway, bad things start happening to the crew. Ophelia starts questioning her own sanity. So yes, the name is a blatant callback to the Ophelia in Hamlet. I like the story, but some of the interior thoughts of Ophelia for me were a little overly long to the point where I thought the novel was like 20% too long. It should have been cut, in my opinion, just a little bit, because I thought it was really slowing the pacing down. But still, overall, a solid horror novel. It was creepy. I didn't know how they were going to get out of the situation or if that was even possible. If you like space horror, I think you'll like this one. Though someone told me that Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes was much better. I don't know, I haven't read it. Maybe I should read that one too. But Ghost Station did what it set out to do, and thus gets my blessing. So those were the 7 books I read, courtesy of Shelve or Shove It. And I didn't have a very good track record, at least for the first half of the year. Of the 7 books, I zapped 3 of them. Of all the books I read, my strongest recommendation is for The Fox Wife by Yangsze Choo. What about you? Did you read any of these books, or do you want to read any of them? Let me know down in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to help me out and give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I'm really hoping the second half of the year will be better than the first half. We shall see. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.